Hi everybody. So this is not something that I would normally do. This is way out of my comfort zone, but my sister-in-law, who coaches high school basketball in Missouri, a couple weeks ago she asked me if I would come to practice and talk to her team and tell them my story, tell them some of the things that I've learned and kind of what I've been through. And since that time, I have had quite a few people ask me how it went and what I talked about. So I thought that I would go through the devotional, the talk that I went through with them. And for most of you, you already know all of my health journey, my health story, and you also already know my basketball history. But I thought that maybe this would be an encouragement to some people. So, anyway, to kind of jump into what I discussed with them, obviously I played basketball and I played from about junior high until college. I was most of the time I was either point guard or shooting guard. And in high school, I kind of bounced around a lot, just kind of wherever they needed me to be. That's what I did. And I loved being on the court. I loved being in the gym. Some of the coolest things that I've done that I told the girls about would probably be that I won a 3-point contest one time. I got voted and was voted for and was able to play on the all-region team at our national tournament in Missouri. And my freshman year of college, my team won the regional championship. All of that to say that I am a competitor, I'm determined, I'm a very independent person, and I had no idea that all of those things were going to get tested the way that they have since then. So a couple of years after graduating college, I was still working out. I was trying to stay in shape. I had been working 2 jobs. I was about to get married. And the first thing that I learned that I want to talk about is that most of our lives are completely out of our control. So I used to think that I would always be strong, that I would always be able to work out and train. The gym was my happy place. So whenever something went wrong or something was stressful that I was dealing with, or something that I was struggling with, or something was out of my control, I would put my headphones in and I would go work out, or I would go for a run. I would go shoot hoops in the driveway. I would train. It didn't matter. That was my escape. And as I got older and I started to get sicker and weaker, I quickly realized that even the small things in life, like working out, that I thought I could control, I could not control. I had to learn to rely on my faith and my support system. Just like in basketball, you don't have any control over the refs and their calls. You don't have any control over your coaches, the other coach, your teammates, the other team. You don't have control over any of it. And I used to get so frustrated because with being sick, I felt like nothing was ever going my way. And I would worry about what might happen. I would worry about if I was gonna get sicker. I would worry about if I would ever get better, if I would ever feel normal. And yeah, at some point, I even started to worry if I was going to die. And I had to learn to let go of how I thought my life should be going. I think that it's normal, and I think most people have a picture of how they think that their life is going to be. And for me, it ended up being completely different from what I thought it was going to look like. And I had to learn to let go and to trust that the plans that I had made are not always best, even if I don't understand why things had to happen the way that they do. So I started feeling bad, and that specifically started with my stomach. Like I said, I had moved, I was about to get married, and I was trying to finish planning the wedding, so I kind of just thought that my stomach was messed up from all of the change and all of the stress. But by the time my wedding day came around, I knew something was wrong. And a couple weeks later, I was supposed to be on vacation, and I ended up in the ER with 104 degree fever that lasted for about 3 days. And that ended up being followed by a bunch of tests, blood work to test for parasites, to test for infections of all different kinds, and it all came back negative, or there was nothing wrong that they could find. So I eventually finally got referred to a local specialist and was able to get a colonoscopy done. And I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is an autoimmune stomach disease, basically. I was put on medication to try to help, and it did for a while, but a few months later, I got diagnosed with psoriasis, which is also a autoimmune issue, and I had to have labs done, and those labs came back showing my liver levels, my liver enzymes, to be crazy high and all over the place. So I got calls from all of my doctors, and they were like, something else is wrong, something else is going on, we have to do more tests, you need to come in. So I ended up having an MRI, and I was diagnosed with something called PSC liver disease, which is basically autoimmune caused cirrhotic liver. And I was at, I believe, stage 3, which is basically irreversible damage. I hadn't shown symptoms, so by the time they caught it for me, there was no going back. So I was told that I needed to get referred to a bigger hospital to confirm the diagnosis and have regular appointments and treatment there. So I was able to get into Mayo Clinic in Rochester, and kind of side note, during that time my colitis was flared up, and it was flared for the span of about a year. I lost 30 to 40 pounds. You could see my ribs. I was barely eating. I couldn't leave my house. I was up in the middle of the night a bunch. I had to switch to a desk job because the job that I was doing was too physically exhausting, too much exertion. So I had to work from home instead. And kind of side note, long story short, I eventually did get back on a medication that treated the colitis and got that back under control. But the second point that I want to make is that trials and struggles force you to rely on other people in your faith, and you can't do things on your own. I played varsity basketball from the time I was about 14 years old. We didn't have a lot of girls my senior year of high school, so most of that year I practiced with the varsity guys, and I loved the challenge. But it didn't matter how good I was individually. When game time came around, I had to rely on my teammates. And when I got sick years later, I tried to do the same thing. I tried to be strong. I tried to get through things on my own. I didn't want to be a burden to my friends and my family, and I didn't want to have to rely on other people. But I quickly realized and was reminded that when you go through something difficult, you have to be able to have a support system and people that love you and help you along the way. If it hasn't already happened, there's going to be a time in your life when you feel completely isolated and alone, and it's going to seem like there might not be anybody else that truly knows what you're going through, and you might feel like needing help is a sign of weakness. I know that was something that I struggled with, but I learned that it is so much easier when you do allow people to help you along the way. And for me specifically, in addition to my family, my friends, my husband, that meant leaning on the Lord, because He's the only one that truly understands our suffering. That said, we all know that basketball is a team sport. You can't be successful on the court unless everybody on the team buys into the plan and the goals, the things that you want to make happen. You have to be able to trust each other and to work together, because injuries are going to come and you're going to face difficult opponents or high pressure situations, and you can't plan for all those things. But if you learn to work together, then you'll be able to overcome a lot more. So when I finally got into Mayo, I had more blood work and tests done, and my doctor there confirmed the PSC liver disease, but he also expressed some concern about a blood marker that came back high, and it was a marker for cancer. So he told me that I needed to have a procedure done, but that the chance of it turning into something more was pretty low. So I ended up having a bunch of those procedures, and I did eventually get diagnosed with bile duct cancer, or cholangiocarcinoma. So the only chance of beating the liver disease and the cancer was to have chemo and radiation followed by a transplant. I went and had a week of what's called transplant evaluation appointments so that I could get put on the transplant list. And then that was followed by 3 weeks of radiation treatment, 5 days a week, every day. And I was also taking chemo twice a day for several months. However, my body was not responding well to the chemo. And from December 31st of 2024 until April of this last year, I almost died of sepsis or a blood infection in the ER, and I was in and out of hospitals and ERs multiple times, and I eventually just got to the point where I was jaundiced, I was swollen, I was barely eating, I was in severe pain, I had chills and was freezing cold all the time. I was sleeping all the time, and pretty much I was just suffering and just trying to get through the day minute by minute. So the third thing that I learned is that you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, because when you're uncomfortable, that's when you're going to grow. We're so blessed to live in the country that we do, but that said, most of us live pretty comfortable lives, and life just isn't all like that, and it's not supposed to be. Most of us, if we get into an uncomfortable situation, all we want to do is hurry up and get out of it. But for me, I had to get used to being uncomfortable all the time. And I know that if it wasn't for those really hard, uncomfortable experiences, I wouldn't have learned to be more patient. I wouldn't have learned to be more kind. I wouldn't have learned to be brave, even when I didn't want to be. And most importantly, I gained a deeper understanding for people around me who are also suffering with their own struggles, their own health issues, their own trials, whatever that looks like. I heard someone recently say something like, we are not comforted for our own benefit, but so that we can be comforters for other people. And I had to learn to view my illness not as a liability, but as an opportunity. Any difficult thing that we go through in life is an opportunity to get better and to get stronger, whether that be as a person or as a basketball player. It works in all those scenarios. So on November 4th of this year, I knew that my time was short. I knew that I was getting worse and I was coming close to the end. My husband had called the doctors multiple times that week, and that Friday he called again, and they told him that they were really worried about me and I needed to come to Mayo and be admitted to the hospital so that I could be watched, because if I didn't go there, I was going to end up in the ER somewhere that weekend. So we packed up all our stuff. I rolled out of bed and got in the car, and we were about 30 minutes from the hospital, and my phone rang, and I assumed that it was the hospital calling to check on us and ask if we were getting close, because it was almost time for them to close their normal hours and it was going into the weekend. So I assumed they were just checking. Well, when I answered, I had finally gotten the call saying that they had a liver for me. And the very next morning, I was prepped. I was taken into surgery, and about 7 hours later, I woke up in ICU with a brand new liver and another chance to live again. So the fourth thing that I learned is actually one of the biggest things that helped me through my illness and especially my transplant and recovery. And it was something that my coaches actually taught us in high school. And that is, yes, I can, yes, I will, and yes, I did. So whenever we were doing a hard drill, or we were playing against a good team, or we were doing something that we struggled with on the court, we were never allowed to say that we would try. Trying wasn't an option. Before we started something hard, we would begin by saying, yes, I can. And while we were doing that hard task, we would say, yes, I will. And once we had completed that hard thing, we would be able to say, yes, I did. And that same strength and confidence and drive that I found in those words during my basketball career, I also was able to use during my transplant. And there were so many days when I did not think that I could make it another minute. There was a lot of times when I wanted to stop living. I wanted to stop going to appointments or stop going to emergency rooms. And every single time that I wanted to quit, I was reminded that the battle that I was facing physically was just as much of a mental battle. If you can train your mind to be confident and strong and determined, if you don't give yourself the option to fail, the option to try, then you can achieve things that you never thought that you could do before. You can do it even when the going is rough and life is hard. So I spent the next few months recovering. It was a long process, but I'm forever thankful for the person and the family who lost somebody so that I might have a chance to live again. And the fifth point that I want to make and that I learned is that time is limited. Don't waste it. I was working out all the time. I was always in the gym competing, always trying to find new ways to push myself mentally and physically to become the best that I can be. And I knew that everybody around me was training and working just as hard as I was, and maybe even harder. I even had a t-shirt in high school that I would wear when I would go for runs, and it said running out of time. And I always got teased about that saying, but the reality is that that's true. We don't have forever to do the things that we want to do or be with the people that we love and care about. In addition to all of my health issues, and not to be depressing, but my brother also had a lot of health issues. He had brain cancer, and he actually passed away in June. So I say that just to tell you guys that life is short. You need to value every minute. You need to use your time wisely. You need to work hard. You need to make memories, because we're only here for so long, and we need to be good stewards of the time that we've been given. The last thing that I'll leave you with, and this was during Thanksgiving week, so I told the girls, please don't take your life, your health, your family, and your friends are the things that you have for granted. Anything that we have can be taken away in a moment. Perspective is everything. Learn to be content where you are. Don't grow complacent in your life. After my transplant, my husband and we found a sign at Hobby Lobby that we bought for the house, and it says, "May I never forget the days that I prayed for the things that I have now." So even though my day-to-day life has improved, struggles changed me, and they pushed me to be a better person. So don't waste the gifts or the opportunities that you have been given, or even the burdens that you have to bear. And that's kind of what I talked about, and some of the main things that I learned. Obviously, there's a lot more along the way, but now you guys know what I told them about. And like I said before I started, hopefully my story is an encouragement to someone else along the way. Thanks for listening.